Right now, a man somewhere in America is turning a brand new buck knife over in his hands and reading a word stamped into the steel in letters small enough to miss. It says China. One owner wrote it up in a review that his new buck had, in his words, China on the blade in very small letters. This is a buck, the American legend your father clipped to his belt. But the same company now stamps that name on blades made overseas, and the only tell is a mark you could shave off with your thumbnail. So before I go one step further, let me tell you what this video is not, because the story about Buck is not the story you are bracing for. Buck did not die. Nobody bought it out. There was no bankruptcy, no hedge fund, no foreign conglomerate that swallowed a great American name and gutted it for parts. Buck Knives is still standing, still private, still owned by the family that started it, 4 generations on. And here's the part that matters most. Buck never left America. The famous blade, the folding hunter, that lived on a generation of belts, is still made in the United States today, in Idaho, as you watch this. What Buck quietly left was not the country, it was a state. Back in 2005, to survive, Buck packed up its whole factory and fled California, and the blade that made its name went with it and stayed American. So this is not a brand that sold you out. It is a brand that had to run to stay alive, and the quieter thing that happened to its logo afterward. By the end, you will know which buck to buy, and how to read a buck blade so you never grab the wrong one by accident. To understand what that logo is worth, you have to go back to where it came from, and it did not come from a factory. It came from a blacksmith. In 1902, a young man named Hoyt Buck was fed up with tool steel that would not hold an edge. So he worked out his own way of tempering steel, his own heat treat, and he tested it on the cheapest raw material he could find. Worn out files, old used up steel files headed for the scrap pile. He reforged them into knife blades that held an edge better than anything on the shelf. That is the founding fact of this company. A better heat treat proven by hand on garbage steel before there was any name to sell. The family kept at it, and by mid-century they were building knives out of a shop behind the house in San Diego. Then in 1964, Buck put out the folding hunter that made it a household name. One of the first dependable production folding lockback knives a working man could trust in his pocket. For the next 60 years, that blade did one job. It earned the reputation the logo now trades on, which is why it matters where the next one gets made. For most of the 20th century, Buck built its knives in California, out of a big plant in El Cajon, just east of San Diego, 200,000 square feet of American knife making. And by the early 2000s, that plant was draining the company. The cost of just keeping the lights on in California had grown too heavy to carry. I am not putting words in anyone's mouth, because the man who ran Buck said it himself in the newspaper. In a 2004 interview with the Spokane paper, the Spokesman-Review, Chuck Buck explained why he was moving the whole operation to Idaho. He said he liked Idaho because it was, in his words, so conservative and very business-minded. He said California's governor was working hard to change the business climate in the state, but, and I am quoting him, we haven't seen it yet. So Buck left. In 2005, the company moved its entire factory from El Cajon, California, up to Post Falls, Idaho. By his own account, the move saved the company over $1.2 million every single year on lower electricity, lower workers' compensation, and wages that ran about 30% under California rates. It carried more than 200 jobs up to Idaho with it. Sit with that. It was not greed that moved this factory. It was survival. The cost of building in California had gotten so heavy that a 100-year-old company had to run to another state to keep making the same knife. And that is the part almost nobody says out loud. So the flagship stayed American. Good. But the second country on that blade is not a recent development, and it did not begin with the move to Idaho. That same 2004 Spokesman-Review interview noted that Buck had, by then, already shifted about 15% of its production to Asia. So even before it left California, Buck was already building some of its cheaper lines, budget knives and specialty knives, overseas, while the flagship stayed home. Same Buck logo, same script on the side, made in China. Take the knife from the top of this video. That is a buck model called the Selkirk, and it is made in China, and it says so in tiny letters on the blade. Now, in fairness to Buck, the Selkirk is not a bad knife. It runs the same grade of stainless steel, the one Buck calls 420 HC, that the American knives use. But it is built on the other side of the world, and the only way you would ever know is that little stamp. Then there is a Buck fillet knife, the Silver Creek, also made in China, and that one does drop the steel to a cheaper grade, what the spec sheet calls 420J2. So here is the honest version, because I am not going to tell you every imported buck is garbage. Some use the same good steel, some a cheaper one. What is always true is that the country changed and the logo did not. And to Buck's credit, it does tell you. Every one of these knives states where it was made, right on the listing and right on the blade. Buck is not hiding a thing. It is just easy to miss, and a lot of guys have never once thought to look. Now let me show you the part that should change what you buy, and it is not what you would guess. You would guess the imported buck is the cheap one, the budget pick. Look at the prices. That China-made Selkirk runs about $85. The American-made Folding Hunter, the one still made in Idaho, runs about $90, only about $5 apart. For almost the exact same money, one is made in America, with Buck's own heat treat, and the other is made in China. The import is saving you almost nothing. You are paying full American price, and if you do not read the stamp, walking out with a Chinese blade for it. Now run the real cost the way a tradesman should. About $90 for the American knife, and Buck backs it with what it calls its forever warranty, in its own words, a warranty for the life of the knife, promising to repair or replace any buck that comes apart on a defect, for the life of the knife. So spread $90 across a working lifetime of carrying it, and the cost per year falls toward pocket change, a few dollars a year, and then nothing, because the warranty means you should never have to buy another. That is what buy it once looks like on paper. And do not assume the warranty is the tell. Buck puts that same forever warranty on the China-made knives too. The warranty does not tell you where the blade was born. Only the stamp does. And here is why that stamp matters more than any number on the box. For a lot of us, a buck was never about the steel. It was the knife your father carried, clipped to his belt in a worn leather sheath, the one he used for everything from a fishing line to a feed sack, the one you maybe still have in a drawer. It is the knife you figured you would hand your own kid someday, the way it got handed to you. That is the whole reason the logo means anything. Behind it is a chain of people who trusted it, going back generations, which is what makes the two-country thing sting. Not because Buck did anything shady, it did not, but because the logo alone used to be enough. You saw the name and you knew. Now, if you want to hand your kid a knife that was made in America, the way the one in your memory was, you cannot just trust the name. You have to turn it over and read the fine print, and you have to teach them to do the same. The logo used to tell you everything. Now it only tells you half, and you have to go find the other half yourself. So why is any of this even allowed? Why can a company build something overseas and still wrap it in the language of American made? Because the rules that are supposed to protect that phrase have a gap in them big enough to drive a truck through. The Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, has a real Made in USA labeling rule, written into the federal rules, and on paper it is strict. For a product to say Made in USA with no qualifiers, the FTC requires that the final assembly happen here, that all the significant work happen here, and that all, or virtually all, of the parts be made and sourced here. In the FTC's own words, the product should contain no or negligible foreign content. That rule has teeth. It went into full effect in 2021, and companies that break it can face civil penalties. But here's the gap. Made in USA is one claim. Assembled in USA is a different one, and it is far weaker. The FTC's own example is a treadmill whose motor, frame, and display are all imported, where the American-made parts come to about 3% of the cost. That treadmill, the FTC says, cannot call itself Made in USA, but it can still say Assembled in USA. Read that again. The guts come from overseas, and the label still gets to wave a flag, and the FTC does enforce this. In 2024, it hit the tractor maker Kubota with a $2 million civil penalty, the largest it has ever handed down under that Made in USA rule for labeling parts American made when the agency found they were made entirely overseas. Now hold Buck up against all of that, because this is where Buck comes out looking good. Buck is not Kubota. When Buck builds a knife in China, it says China right on the steel. The problem with Buck was never a lie. The problem is only that the same beloved logo now sits on two different countries, and the law does nothing to make that obvious to you at the counter. So the job lands where it always lands, on you, the buyer, which means you need to know what to look for. And the good news is that the honest answer is not some brand you have never heard of. You do not have to abandon Buck to get an American knife. That is the twist most of these videos miss. The knife to buy, the blade that never had to leave America, is Buck's own flagship. The Folding Hunter, the model called the 110, and its fixed blade brother, the 119 Special. Both are still made in Post Falls, Idaho today. Both run Buck's own 420 HC stainless, hardened with the heat treat this company has refined since its founder retempered his first files, long tied to a heat treat master named Paul Boss. And both carry that forever warranty for the life of the knife. Here is how you confirm you are holding the American one. Turn the blade over and read the tang, the flat part of the steel near the handle. The American knives are stamped Buck USA. The imports carry the Buck name with a small separate China mark. Then check the steel listed on the box or the page. 420 HC on the flagship. And one honest note, even on the American 110, the leather sheath is made in Mexico. The blade is the American part, and the blade is the part you are buying. By outside counts, not Buck's own number, something like 85 to 87% of Buck's knives by model are still made in that Idaho plant. The famous ones never left. If you want a second American name in your pocket, the runner-up is Case, W.R. Case & Sons, still making knives in Bradford, Pennsylvania. But Case will make you do the same homework, because Case has its own imported line called Tech X, made in China. Same lesson, different logo, read the stamp. So that is the whole game, and it is simpler than the tool companies would like it to be. The Buck knife your father trusted is still out there, still made in America, still backed for the life of the blade. It costs about $90, which over a lifetime of carrying it comes to a few dollars a year, then nothing. The only thing that changed is that the logo stopped doing all the work for you. These days you have to turn the blade over and read the last two letters yourself. Buck USA. Buy that one, teach your kids to check for it, and let the warranty make it the last knife you ever have to buy. And if you want to know which other American names in your toolbox are still telling you that same quiet two-country story, that is the next blade we turn over.